The morning Nora Whitfield decided to fire the entire maintenance crew. She had already been awake for 31 hours. She stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of her office on the 14th floor of Whitfield Medical Center in Ottawa, watching the October sky turn from gray to a slightly darker gray, holding a coffee that had gone cold sometime around the third board presentation. The building carried her family name that had never felt like a weight until recently. The boiler on the east wing had failed for the second time in 6 weeks. Ward 4C, pediatric oncology, had dropped to 16 degrees overnight. The overnight nursing supervisor had handled it with blankets and portable heaters and had not called Nora until 6 in the morning, which meant she had spent the first hour of her day apologizing to parents who had kept their sick children warm by holding them through the night. One mother had not said anything. She had just looked at Nora with the particular exhaustion of someone who had stopped expecting things to go right. That look followed Nora into every meeting that morning. The maintenance contractor her predecessor had hired, a firm out of Mississauga called Stellan Group, had sent the same technician twice. Both times he had filed a report citing aging infrastructure and recommended a full system overhaul that would cost the hospital $400,000 and take 3 months. Both times the boiler had held for roughly 3 weeks before failing again. Nora had requested the original diagnostic report. It had taken Stellan Group 11 days to send it. When it arrived, 2 pages were missing. Her facilities manager, a well-meaning man named Gerald who had been in the role since before Nora was born, told her not to worry. "These things take time," he said. "The system is old." Nora had nodded. She had also called her brother that evening and asked him who actually knew boilers. Her brother did not know, but his neighbor did. Marcus Hale was 43 years old and drove a 2009 Ford pickup that had rust along the wheel wells and a child's drawing of a horse taped to the dashboard. He arrived at the hospital's service entrance at 7:15 on a Tuesday 20 minutes early, carrying a thermos and a canvas bag of tools. The security guard at the gate asked for his credentials. He handed over a laminated card from the Ontario Skilled Trades Authority and waited without any impatience while the guard made a phone call. Nora was told by Gerald that the new fellow had arrived. Gerald referred to him as the new fellow for the entire first week. She did not meet Marcus that morning. She was in a budget meeting. She met him by accident 3 days later, when she walked through the east boiler room at 7 in the evening and found him still there, lying on his back on a sheet of cardboard, a flashlight between his teeth, both arms inside a panel she had not seen opened in the 8 months she had been director. She said, "I thought the crew went home at 5. He pulled the flashlight from his mouth and looked at her without sitting up. "The crew did," he said. "I had a question I wanted to answer first." She waited. He sat up slowly, the way people do when their back has been on concrete for several hours. "Someone replaced the pressure relief valve," he said. "Not recently. Probably 2 years ago, maybe 3. They put in a valve rated for a different system. Not wrong enough to fail immediately, just wrong enough to fail repeatedly, under load in cold weather." He set the flashlight down on the cardboard. The Stellan reports didn't mention it. Nora looked at the valve he was pointing to. It looked like every other valve she had ever not known the name of. "How certain are you?" she said. "I can be wrong," he said. "I'm not wrong about this." She stood there for a moment. The boiler room smelled like rust and old grease and the faint chemical sweetness of coolant. She had spent the last 6 weeks being told the problem was age, infrastructure, inevitability. This man, lying on cardboard in a hospital basement at 7 in the evening, was telling her it was a valve. "You work for the contract through Gerald," she said. "Yes, you're not on the permanent staff." "No, what's your rate?" he told her. It was a third of what Stellan Group charged per visit. She nodded once. "Fix it," she said, and walked back to the elevator. His name was Marcus James Hale. She found this out from Gerald's paperwork, which she pulled the following morning. He was listed as a mechanical contractor, specialized in HVAC and industrial heating systems, certified in 3 trades. His address was in Canada. His emergency contact was listed as Lily Hale, daughter, with a cell number. She did not know why she read as far as the emergency contact. She told herself it was thoroughness. The valve was replaced by Thursday. Ward 4C held at 22 degrees through the weekend and the following week and the week after that. Gerald was pleased in the way that people are pleased when a problem goes away without requiring them to understand it. He praised the new fellow at the facilities meeting. He mispronounced his name. Nora corrected him. Gerald looked surprised. People often looked surprised when Nora remembered details. She had learned to seem less attentive than she was. It was a skill she had developed over 8 years of being the youngest person in most rooms, and then one of the few women, and then both simultaneously. Marcus came back the following Tuesday to do a full inspection of the secondary heating loop. Nora passed him in the hallway outside radiology. He was looking at something on a clipboard and stepped slightly to the left without looking up, making room for her without acknowledging her. She stopped. "The ward is holding," she said. He looked up. He had gray starting at his temples and the kind of face that had been outdoors a great deal in its life. "Good," he said. "I want a written report. Everything you found. I sent one to Gerald yesterday. I'd like one sent to me directly," she said, and gave him her email. He wrote it down on the corner of the clipboard sheet without asking her to repeat it. The report arrived at 11:40 that night. It was 4 pages long and written with a precision she had not expected. Not clinical, exactly, but careful. Each finding was described, sourced, and attached to a recommendation. The recommendations were numbered and prioritized. At the bottom was a single line. "The east wing secondary loop has a similar valve configuration to the primary. I would suggest inspection before December." She read it twice. October became November the way it does in Ottawa, all at once, with ice on the windshields and a cold that came from the ground up. Nora had grown up here and had never adjusted to it, which she considered a personal failure. She walked to work when the weather permitted. It did not permit this for much of November. She saw Marcus 3 more times that month. Once in the parking structure when she was leaving late and he was arriving early. He nodded without stopping. Once in the cafeteria, where he was sitting alone with a sandwich and what appeared to be a textbook, reading with the focused stillness of someone who reads because they need to, not because they have time. And once outside the east entrance, where she came through the door and nearly walked into him. He was on his phone. She caught a fragment of conversation. "Left it on the kitchen table, Lily. The purple folder. Ask Mrs. Arsenault to help you find it." A pause then, quieter. "I know, I'll be home for dinner, I promise." He ended the call and saw her. "Daughter," Nora said, which was not something she had planned to say. 7 years old, he said. There was something that moved across his face briefly, not quite pride, not quite grief, and then it was gone. "The East Loop valve," she said, because she needed to say something professional. "Scheduled for just week," he said, and held the door open for her. The letter arrived on a Wednesday. Nora's assistant brought it in with the morning documents. A physical letter, which was unusual, on paper that was heavier than standard. It was from a law firm in Toronto she did not recognize, Alderman Croft and Beaumont. It stated, in the careful language of legal correspondence, that Whitfield Medical Center was being named in a civil action related to negligent maintenance practices, and that the plaintiff was represented by interests connected to Stellan Group Facility Services. She read it 3 times. Then she called her general counsel. Then she sat very still for a while. The lawsuit claimed that the hospital had terminated its Stellan Group contract without proper notice, in violation of the service agreement, and had engaged in practices that damaged Stellan's professional reputation. It requested damages. The amount made her assistant inhale sharply when she saw it. Nora's general counsel told her not to panic. He used the word manageable. Nora had found that lawyers used that word in inverse proportion to how manageable something actually was. She pulled the Stellan Group contract herself that evening. She read it page by page. On page 11, in a subsection about termination procedures, she found language that had not been in the version Gerald had shown her when she signed it. Or, she looked at the date at the bottom of the page. Possibly she had signed a different version. She photographed both pages with her phone. She sat with them for a long time. The next morning she found Marcus in the East Mechanical Room, doing the secondary loop inspection he had flagged in his report. "Can I ask you something outside your work order?" she said. He set down the pressure gauge. "You can ask." She showed him the photographs on her phone. "The valve you found," she said. "The wrong-rated one on the primary loop. When would that have been installed, if you had to estimate?" He looked at the photographs first. She watched his eyes move, reading something she couldn't, and then he answered the valve question. "Whoever did it knew what they were doing," he said. "The install was clean. Just the wrong part. Stellan Group has been our contractor for 4 years." He didn't say anything. "If someone wanted a system to fail," she said predictably, "on a schedule, without failing catastrophically, that valve would do it," he said. "Every cold season. Enough to require service calls. Not enough to cause real harm." He paused. "Usually." She put her phone in her pocket. "I need a written statement," she said. "Official. Everything you found, with dates, photographs, your credentials. Would you be willing?" He looked at her for a long moment. Not the way people look when they're deciding whether to help. More like the way they look when they're deciding how much to say. "You should also pull the permits for the original valve installation," he said. "Whoever filed them either made an error or didn't. How do I find that?" "City of Ottawa Building Permits Database," he said. "It's public. You need the address and the approximate year." She had not known it was public. She was the director of a hospital, and she had not known that. "I'll have the statement to you by tomorrow morning," he said, and picked up the pressure gauge. The permits took her 2 evenings to trace. She had asked her general counsel to do it, and he had demurred, citing scope of work, which she had learned meant he didn't want to. She did it herself on her laptop at home, at the kitchen table, with the city database and a notepad, and the kind of methodical patience that she had developed over years of her ideas being dismissed until she could prove them with documentation. The original valve installation had been permitted under a company called Breck Technical Services. Breck Technical Services had been dissolved in 2019. Its principals were listed in the corporate registry. 2 names, one of which matched a name in the Alderman Croft and Beaumont letterhead. She stared at that for a while, then she called her brother. "The neighbor you sent me," she said. "Marcus Hale. How do you know him?" There was a pause. "He fixed my furnace 2 winters ago," her brother said. "Why? Does he have a background? Other than trades?" "I don't know what you mean." "I mean, did he seem to know things outside his trade work?" Another pause longer. "He mentioned once that he used to do something else," her brother said. "Engineering, I think?" "He didn't talk about it much. I figured it was one of those things people don't talk about." She thanked him and hung up. The following morning, before Marcus arrived, she pulled his contractor file and read it fully for the first time. His trade certifications were there, current, in order. His references were 3 facility managers at hospitals in Hamilton, Kingston, and Sudbury. She called the Kingston one because she had met that director once at a conference. "Marcus Hale," the director said, when Nora gave the name. "He worked for us for about 8 months. Did you find him reliable?" "Very," Nora said. "He'll see something no one else sees," the director said. "He fixed a problem we'd been billing to infrastructure for 2 years. Turned out to be a sensor $60 part." A brief pause. "He doesn't say much, but when he says something, listen." Nora thanked her and sat with that for a moment. Then she went down to the east wing. She found him in the corridor outside the mechanical room, closing up his tool bag. She had planned to ask him a measured professional question. What she said instead was, "What did you do before this?" He straightened and looked at her. "I'm not asking to intrude," she said. "I'm asking because I've been trying to understand why you know what you know." He was quiet for a moment. Outside the corridor window, It had started to snow, the first real snow of the season, the heavy kind that accumulated quickly. He watched it for a second, then looked back at her. "I was a mechanical engineer," he said. "Structural and thermal systems. I worked for a firm that did infrastructure assessments. Public buildings, municipal facility." "What happened?" "My wife got sick," he said. "Lily was too. I needed work that had a clock, start time, finish time. Engineering contracts don't always have that." A brief pause. "Then she died, and I stayed with what worked." She did not say she was sorry. She had heard that said to her enough times after her own losses to know it sat strangely, no matter how it was meant. Instead, she said, "The permits for the original valve installation trace back to a company connected to the firm suing us." He didn't look surprised. He looked the way people look when something confirms what they suspected. "I know," he said. She looked at him. "You knew before I told you." "I didn't know," he said. "I looked at the wrong valve and thought about why someone would install it. There's a short list of reasons." "Why didn't you say so?" "Because I didn't have evidence," he said. "I had a valve." She stood in the corridor with the snow happening outside and the hospital doing what hospitals do around them. Quiet machinery, distant voices, the PA calling a name in another wing. "I need you to testify to what you found," she said. "The valve, the installation, the differential between what was in my contract and what Stellan filed." "I know," he said. "This is going to be more complicated than a maintenance job." "I know that too." She studied him. "You could walk away," she said. "You're a contractor. This isn't your problem." He picked up his tool bag. "My daughter's school is 3 blocks from this hospital," he said. "Her piano teacher brings her here for her asthma checkups. This is a children's ward that dropped to 16 degrees because someone needed a service contract to keep running." He looked at her evenly. "It's my problem." What happened next took 6 weeks and was not clean. Nora's general counsel, once presented with the permit records and Marcus's written statement, became considerably more interested in the case. He brought in a litigation specialist. The specialist contacted the Ontario College of Trades, which opened its own inquiry into the valve installation. The city pulled the permits independently after Nora submitted a formal request. Douglas Alderman, the named partner in the firm representing Stellan Group, withdrew from the case on a Thursday afternoon in December. No reason was given publicly. Nora's counsel told her, unofficially, that the permits had created problems for his client that exceeded the value of the lawsuit. Stellan Group's civil action was discontinued before Christmas. Gerald retired in January, on his own timeline, which Nora had gently suggested might be the right moment. He took his orchids and his 32 years of institutional knowledge and moved to Kelowna, where his grandchildren lived. She hired a facilities director from the Kingston Hospital, a woman named Patricia, who had started her career as a boilermaker and had opinions about preventive maintenance that she shared at length and without invitation, which Nora found entirely appropriate. The East Wing held through the winter and the winter after. On the last day Marcus was under contract, Nora walked to the service entrance to sign off on his final work order. It was March and still cold, but the quality of the light had changed, that particular March light that Canadians recognize as a promise, if not yet a delivery. He was loading his tools into the truck. She signed the form and handed it back. He folded it and put it in his jacket pocket. "Lily," she said. "Is she? How is she?" Something in his face shifted. "She asked me to bring her to see the big building her dad fixed," he said. Her words. "You can bring her," Nora said. "Whenever, I'll make sure someone shows her around." He looked at her. "That's kind." "It's not kind," she said. "The ward was 16 degrees. You're why it isn't anymore." She paused. "I want her to see that her father does work that matters." He didn't say anything for a moment. Across the parking lot, a crow landed on a power line and considered the situation. "Do you know what she said when I told her about the valve?" he said finally. "The wrong part?" Nora waited. She said, "Did you tell them it wasn't their fault? They just had the wrong piece?" He almost smiled. 7 years old. Nora thought about a mother in a ward at 4 in the morning, holding her child under blankets, not expecting anything to be fixed. She thought about permits filed under dissolved company names, and contracts with pages that appeared and disappeared, and a man lying on cardboard in a boiler room at 7 in the evening because he had a question he wanted to answer. "Yes," she said, "that's exactly what it was." He closed the tailgate of the truck. She noticed, as she hadn't before, that the drawing taped to the dashboard had been updated. Still a horse, but bigger now, more confident, the kind of horse a 7-year-old draws when she's been practicing. He drove out through the service gate. She watched until the truck turned onto Parkdale and disappeared. Then she went back inside, because there was a budget meeting at 10 and a ward to run and a building that carried her name and was, finally, warm.